We met a few years ago. I was given an opportunity. You were looking, I think, for somebody to go out on Emerson Drive or something. And I think that was the first time we had a chance to work together across this fine country of ours, maybe one or two things before that. And, it formed a great mentorship. I learned a lot from doing shows with you, particularly fascinated with your history. Canada, Seattle, with Pearl Jam's management, Heart's management, just kind of everything all seems to be intertwining. From a guy from Ontario, we heard wonders of this space. We heard wonders of the Seattle scene. We heard wonders of British Columbia and sort of everything kind of connecting between the two. And your story to me seems like it's the ultimate connection between the two sides, because you're here, you've had Pearl Jam and Heart, and we'll get into that for our listeners as far as to make them understand how relationships work with artists. But what's the first thing in Paul Mercs' brain that says music industry?
Commodore Ballroom.
The Commodore Ballroom.
Yeah.
Famous ballroom, Western Canada. Look it up. It's too long of a list at this point to get into on the podcast, but the great Aaron Chapman wrote a book about it. You can find online. The Commodore Ballroom, you went to see a show, or you wanted to be a booker, or what was it that was sort of like, this is what I'm going to do for a living right here? Yeah,
well, I was young. Hey, the first job I actually had was in England in 1970 at something called the Bath Blues Festival. And I went there and got a job helping set the site up, and, didn't know anything from anything, and except I love music and I love shows. And, I met the promoter there, and it was a show with, Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and a lot of American acts, Santana and Jefferson Airplane and stuff. And, setting up the show, I found a perch on stage left on a road case for the show, and I didn't leave. I just sat there for the whole show. And, no more than, I remember opening my eyes at one point in time when Led Zeppelin was on and seeing Jimmy Page not more than 3 feet in front of me, looking at me playing a solo, right, with 300,000 people out in the audience. And, you have that kind of experience, and it kind of draws you to the business, I think. And so I went back to Canada, and just through sheer in a kind of fluke of circumstance, met a guy that wanted to do a show, and we talked about it. And so in 1972, 72, I walked up the stairs of the Commodore Ballroom, and the stairs of the Commodore Ballroom are an institution in themselves. And I met with Drew Burns and some of his partners, and I said to them, "Hey, I want to do a show," and I really didn't know much about anything, and they said, "Sure." So we booked a show on 11 days' notice. We booked Captain Beefheart, who, if you don't know who he is, check him out. He's like just unbelievable. He had played with Frank Zappa, and he had a great record out. And so we booked him on 11 days' notice and sold out 2 Commodore Ballrooms on 11 days. And that was my first experience. So really a lot of what music is for me goes back to that time in the Commodore.
I like how you had said that you'd called about doing a show, but you'd never done a show before, and Drew just let you kind of do it. So the process now for a lot of these places is obviously it's either run by Live Nation or it's run by a competitor, or they hold it pretty tight. Someone rarely maybe rent it out to a outside of a corporate gig or two, but for someone else to come in and do concerts, I guess back then it was a bit more common because they had to fill the calendar. What was that? I mean, that moment of like, yeah, just go ahead, I'll teach you how to run a concert, or they just basically gave you the room? How did you have to?
Yeah, they just gave me the room. They had done very few shows of the modern era. I think in Aaron's book, he refers to that show I did there as kind of the first show of the modern era of concerts in the Commodore Ballroom, right? So, Drew had been using it for union meetings and, the Fifth Date Club, which was the singles kind of thing in Vancouver at the time. And it wasn't an active concert venue at the time. It was very, very rare that there was a show. I think I had seen Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels in there, and that was pretty awesome. I think I saw BTO and ZZ Top in there, hence the beard. And there have been a couple things. So when I went in there with Captain Beefheart, that was really the first of what became the Commodore era, I think. And he just said, go ahead and do a show. And we had to figure out how to do it. And I'm still not sure how we did it. I don't know to this day if we made money or not. I don't have a clue, you know. So
I remember talking to an agent at Feldman when I first started going, I want to do a show. I've never done a show. And the agent had to actually walk me through how to do a show. Well, you got to do this and you got to do that. And I'm sure at the time there was a little bit more info in there than I needed to, you know, for the artists, you got to take care of them like this or whatever. But I think it was Sam Tuma was my first agent at Feldman in Toronto. And I just remember it being him and Jeff Crape and those guys were, this is how you do a show. And they walked it through, and then you just do the next one, and then you do the next one, and away you go. And it was kind of fun. So, was it a common thing then? Did you kind of do a whole bunch from that point? Like that was fun, or did it kind of have to ramp up? You slowly had to build yourself up into becoming like a local promoter. Is that the idea? Yeah,
it took a while. I think that was in 1973, and that was like 47 years ago that I did that first show. And so we, we slowly started trying to reach out to agents and get the next show, right? And I remember flying down to Los Angeles and, cold calling agents. I think the first agent that took a meeting with me is Dan Weiner, who's I think it was IFA or something like that at the time. And he's, I think still he's with Paradigm as far as I know still today. And I spoke to him not too long ago. And, he took the first meeting and he asked me, how many shows I did a year, and I probably said 3, and he kind of, rolled his eyes, and so just bit by bit, we started booking shows, and then we started going into the civic theaters, who hated us at the time, right? Because we put the first rock shows into the Queenie, and the Orpheum was still a movie house at that time. We started doing, the odd show, and just slowly building up our volume over probably like 3 years, something like that, into 76, 77, which is, when I then went to Seattle and started working out of there.
There's what's the greatest era of music conversations, but what's the greatest era to become a promoter? Would you say that, no one's going to learn how you guys learned?
Yeah.
Coming from there, flying down to meet agents and trying to find artists and trying to develop relationships. Like, to me, how much money are you investing just to get the artists, right?
Yeah. Well, there weren't, Vancouver didn't have, it had a few guys in front of me that were promoters and did a few shows. And then shortly after I got kind of rolling, Periscope came along, which, part of that whole chain now of Norman Perry and Riley O'Connor and all those guys. But, it was a pretty amazing time, because there was so much music breaking all the time. There was a time when, Heart was breaking and Foreigner was breaking, and, whomever, Rush and Styx and all these rock bands of that era. Every year there was a Supertramp. There was a new band that, was an arena act instantly, or like within minutes, it seemed. And so it was a great time if you got yourself positioned, properly. There was a lot of business that was coming down the pike in those days. Just act after act after act became arena acts, and in those early 70s times. And then people had to, find the promoter. Did the Polestar book even exist then? I don't, right? No, right. No, there were no fax machines in those days.
Yeah. Amazing. So I'm amazed at how everything got done back then.
It was really a wonderful time, because, we would, like I did the first Def Leppard tour of Western Canada. And, you talk to the agent, and with a pencil, you would write into a sheet that had the list of expenses on it, mimeographed. It wasn't even photocopiers then. So it had a list of might be, and you hand wrote in what you expected them to be, and then you would mail them or courier them to New York or LA to the agent, and you would spend hours on the phone with a booking agent, going over every line item, like every line item. On every show in every city. So you would talk about, your catering, you've got $3,000 for catering in Vancouver. Like, how did you come up with that number? What do you think? And every line item you would talk about, and way different than now, right? And it was also a great opportunity to build relationships with agents because you were on the phone with them for so long, right? And I think I did a really great job with that. I mean, by the time when I first went to Seattle, I went to work with a company down there, and we were like definitely at the bottom of the heap in terms of promoters. But, by the time I left, we were the dominant promoter in the Northwest, and I was probably doing 300 shows a year, and all over the Northwest, into the Southwest, into Phoenix and Tucson and Albuquerque, and into Alaska, into Anchorage and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was just a great time because there's so many great acts coming down the pike all the time, and you could build that relationship with the agents.
Were you primarily West Coast? Yeah.
In Canada, I would, I was West Coast. In Canada, I would do, eventually got as far as Winnipeg in those early days. And then eventually, afterwards became a national promoter here. But a lot of Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, and Spokane, and Yakima, and then down into not really California, because again there was a dominant promoter there, and Bill Graham. But places like Phoenix and Tucson and Albuquerque, I would do Supertramp and other acts through those markets.
Thanks for stopping by, friends, to the Brenton on Tour podcast channel on YouTube. Coffee, music, travel, life, all of those things. One page, lots of guests, lots of chatter. We talk about all of it. If you like it, subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment. I'll get back to you. Thanks, friends. See you next time.